Hello, this is Wildly from Wildly Tarot, and this is your Moonday message for the people beginning on February 1st, 2021. Happy Imbolc. We are at one of the cross-quarter holidays in the pagan calendar. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, it simply means that we're at the midway point between a solstice and an equinox. So between winter solstice and moving into spring equinox, we're at that halfway point. We're at the divider of that. It just is a different way of looking at linear time as opposed to breaking things up by months. We're breaking them up by cycles. So there's a first half of a cycle and a second half of a cycle, and we're at this transition period in between. And so for myself, I always feel transitions in my body. I always feel them in my life. This is a collective energy that we are all working with, we're all navigating, and it comes at this time where Mercury is also retrograde, so there's this real slowing down happening, even as in our bodies we're beginning to recognize that we are moving closer to spring, that the daylight is changing just as everything changes, but our animal body is really able to pick up on these very subtle clues in our environment that we may not necessarily be picking up on mentally, consciously. So just remembering that if you're feeling any sort of anxiety or buzz or stress today or this week, that it is perhaps nothing more than the animal body picking up cues and feeling some excitement about coming out of hibernation. It's just one other way to reframe and look at what we might be moving through. So now the cards that came forward to support us this week, it's really clear, strong message to me. The first two I'm going to pull up together. They feel really interlinked, really connected. We have the Emperor and the Queen of Swords. And so I'm sensing this as really holding that polarity, that duality that we're always working with in our lives. We've got the electric example. You know, previously I may have referred to this as the masculine quality, but we're going to call it the electric quality, the quality of yang, the quality of putting our energy outward. And it's coupled here with the Queen of Swords, which is that magnetic example, the archetype of calling in, of receiving. We may have previously referred to this as the feminine archetype, but we're working with our language, at least I am here in the Joywork Cottage, to be more inclusive to all of our siblings who may not fall on that particular spectrum of simply man or woman, but giving space through our language to include everyone's experience. So just tapping into that sensation for all of us collectively. And then feeling into this week, we have these two colliding here. And what I'm sensing through this is that they're actually working synergistically. So they're working and complementing one another. So Queen of Swords, this card really speaks to being very, very clear on our inner boundaries, on our inner boundary work, on what we know to be our truth. This is one of the fiercest cards in the tarot deck, in my opinion. It's the archetype of having our boundaries so clear that we don't even need to defend them. We don't need to protect. You know, this being, the sword is pointed down. The boundaries are there. They're very clear, but they're not held upright. They're not being aggressive. They're not being pushed into anyone else's face. I also really like that this being is clothed in pink. It really draws me and reminds me of rose quartz, of that sensation of loving ourselves so much that we can have really firm, clear boundaries. And we know that it's nothing personal. We're not creating boundaries to harm anyone outside of ourselves. We're doing it as an act of love and care for our own personal being so that we can be full, resilient, and continue to show up for those around us. So this archetype, as I'm feeling into it this week, it's really about giving ourselves the space to be with our truth. So once again, just like through all of 2020, we're now moving into 2021, and there's a very divisive feel in the air, in the field. And regardless of what you think about the vaccine coming out and its efficacy, or about schools opening up, or about any topic really, we're in this space collectively where there's been a lot of fighting for space, and not just to have space, but to convince those around us of what your personal truth is. And I'm not saying you in particular, I'm saying the grand you. There's just been this big, impulsive, just dissonance that I've been sensing, where a majority of people latch on to an idea that they have then decided is reality, and instead of simply sitting in the Queen of Swords and holding that as their own personal reality, there's a tendency or desire to make sure everyone else is holding that reality with them. And again, this is not a pushback on anything, it's not a pushback on science, it's not a pushback on politics. It's simply the truth that regardless, every person has a right to their own sacred point of view. And there's nothing good or bad or right or wrong about that. It simply is. We all live within a reality that is created by our five senses physically, that's created by our trauma that we have moved through, created by whatever we were brought up with from our family of origin, created by the communities in which we move, created by the lifestyle that we live, the privileges that we entertain, our coworkers, our family, our lovers. We are all these complex, beautiful, multifaceted jewels that have a very specific way of looking at things through the lens that we each carry. And to disrespect one another's lens is to not allow everyone the freedom to explore that lens and grow at their own pace. So I'm feeling this Queen as this invitation to create some spaciousness and get true with our truth without having to have it be validated or affirmed by those around us. That we can simply be in our truth, make the choices that are right for us without needing to convince or share in that with everyone else. And this feels backed up with the Emperor, which is, again, that electric energy, the one that creates the container that the magnetic energy then draws into. So while we are getting clear on our own personal truth, we're creating the container around ourselves that gives us the spaciousness to be with that curiosity and with that exploration. It's really, really fascinating how our truth can get influenced so much by the other information that we are taking in from other imperfect human beings, And I just always remember and think about science, which I love. I love science. I went to college for science. I am so blessed and grateful to be living in the United States and have access to Western medicine when I'm having an emergent situation that requires active and quick care. Very, very pleased with that option and that I live in that privilege. And one thing that I do know about science is that it has been an ever-evolving process. And when we cling to an ideal in science without giving it the spaciousness to evolve and transform as new information comes in, then we, in effect, keep it in a box and make it less effective in the future, because we don't allow the spaciousness for the inevitable change that comes in with Mother Nature to continue to evolve our knowledge. So what I'm sensing here with the Emperor is that what we're all needing this week is some spaciousness to create that container and space for ourselves as we move through the Queen of Swords, as we get clear on what our belief systems are. I'm really hearing this invitation, even though we've been living in a year plus of isolation or whatever space you've been in, with a lot of love and care and kindness to that. I'm feeling this as mental space, giving ourselves some mental space. You are being given permission to take a break this week mentally from media, from research, from taking things in, from hearing about what's the next crises heading our way. You are given permission from this Emperor to take some space and breathe and allow some rest and see what truths bubble up from your own inner core that can carry you through the rest of this month and year, and really connecting us through to the spring equinox at this time. And the medicine card that is here for us, Seven of Swords, is to remind us, don't get stuck in daydreaming. And daydreaming can be both positive and negative, right? If we get stuck in a fear cycle where we're looking to the future and really, really afraid of what's coming our way, even though it hasn't materialized yet, that is also a form of daydreaming in which we are projecting our energy and ourselves into the future, which is not yet defined. And when we do so, we rob ourselves of precious energy that we can be utilizing today, now, in this moment, to make our lives happen. So when the sevens come up, they're always a clear check mark that says, hey, you might be straying off the path. You might be allowing yourself to be distracted or have shattered focus as you are moving through your life. So take good care this week. Pay attention. Have you let some of your habits that are really supportive slide in the last few weeks? Particularly with Mercury in retrograde, this is connected a lot to technology. So you might have had a lot of things not working for you. And do you allow yourself the space to take a break from those things until you feel more calm and level to tap back in? Or do you just sit there and say, why is the printer not working, and keep trying over and over and over again with no success, just getting more and more frustrated and watching the cortisol levels rise in your body? So take good care, bring your attention back to focus. Even if it means making the to-do list a little bit smaller, make the to-do list anyway and do your best to show up for yourself. Because the archetype that's here for all of us this week is strength. And I really like this card. It has this beautiful oak leaf. But what I'm drawn to this week is the roots. We can't have that tall, old oak before we've got the root system in place to hold it. The roots that take us down deep, that give us nourishment, that show us our place in the world. This is a week for tuning in, finding our place, what our truth is, our sacred point of view, and setting roots in that so that we aren't run amok by the influence of everyone else who may not be in the same frequency that we are. Yes, that feels like the message for us this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this message serves you well and that you have everything that you need. And welcome to February. I looked at my calendar this morning and things are starting to fill up. So if I may be of a support to you, please check out the link in my bio or go to my website at wildlytarot.com to schedule a session. I'm offering them via Zoom, over the phone, or locally, socially distanced if you are here in the Columbia Gorge. I would be delighted to share space with you. Other than that, take good care, and we will see you next Monday.